Princess Zira stood on the balcony of the imperial palace, her eyes scanning the vast expanse of the capital planet below. Lights flickered across the city, as if the entire galaxy was waiting for her every movement, her posture regal and deliberate, as if to remind anyone who dared look that she was in control. But deep inside she wasn't in control of anything. Not really. She had long ago learned how to wear the mask of perfection. The mask that shielded her from the universe's unrelenting gaze. Beneath the delicate fabrics and shimmering silks, she hid the brokenness, the disfigurement that came from an assassination attempt that had left her scared inside and out. It had been years, but the fear still clung to her like a shadow, always present, always reminding her of her vulnerability. Yet she knew she could never show it, never let anyone see the truth of what she had become. Her legacy would be her beauty and strength, not her weaknesses. The galaxy expected nothing less of her, and she intended to live up to their expectations, even if it meant losing herself in the process. Each day, she wore her scars like a hidden blade, knowing that if they were ever revealed, the Empire would turn its back on her. The thought was enough to send a chill down her spine. She was trapped by her own image, trapped in a world that demanded perfection. But as the weight of the crown pressed down on her shoulders, Zira wondered if there was ever a chance to break free, to show the world that she was more than the flawless facade they saw before them. But those thoughts always drifted away when duty called, and she knew that duty was more important than anything else. The Lorethan Empire had to remain strong. Its future depended on her. She couldn't afford to be weak, not even for a moment, not even in the quiet moments alone, when she looked at herself in the mirror and saw only the ghost of the woman she once was. She had to be the heir, the ruler, the one who would carry her people to victory, the one who would crush any challenge to her reign with an iron fist, without hesitation or fear. But still there was a nagging doubt, a whisper that wondered what would happen if someone saw through the mask. What if someone found the girl who cried in the dark after the attack? What if someone uncovered the truth of the scars she wore, so carefully hidden beneath layers of technology and elegance? She had long since abandoned the hope that anyone would ever see her for who she truly was, not in a galaxy full of intrigue and manipulation. But perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps someone would see. Perhaps someone would dare to look past the perfection and the fear and find her, the real her. But who was she fooling? Nobody cared about the broken parts of a princess. All that mattered was her strength, her appearance, her ability to lead and keep the empire from crumbling under the weight of its own ambitions. Yet as she stood there in the quiet of the night, feeling the cool breeze against her skin, something shifted within her, a tiny spark of hope. For the first time in years, she wondered what it would be like to take the mask off just for a moment, just to breathe, and let someone else see her as she truly was. Not a ruler, not an heir, but a person lost in her own pain, longing for something more than the life she had been forced to live. Leo adjusted the straps on his toolkit as he walked through the grand halls of the palace, his boots clicking against the smooth marble floor. It was the first time he had been inside the heart of the empire, and everything about the place felt both surreal and intimidating. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, the walls adorned with alien artwork that seemed to shift and change as you passed by. Each step took him further into a world that felt both vast and closed off, a world that wasn't his. He had always known his place on the outskirts, the human engineer sent to fix the machines and make everything work. But now he was surrounded by luxury and power far beyond what he had ever imagined. He had seen the Lorethan Empire from the outside, their fleets towering above the atmosphere, their technology advanced in ways humans couldn't quite replicate. Yet here he was walking among the elite and working on their personal ships. Something didn't sit right with him, something about the way the air seemed to change when he entered the royal sections of the palace, like he wasn't just another technician, but a piece in a much larger game, a game he didn't quite understand. It wasn't just the scale of the place or the opulence that made him uneasy. It was the way the people around him moved with purpose, their expressions too polished, too perfect, like they were all playing their parts. And Leo had always been bad at playing roles. He was a fixer, a builder, not a player in someone else's story. That was when he first saw her, Princess Zira. Though he hadn't known it was her at first, She was just a figure in the distance, someone flanked by guards, walking with the cold, calculated grace of someone who had never made a mistake, not in her life. Leo had always been good at noticing details, how people carried themselves, how they reacted to things, and when Zira had passed by him for the first time, he had felt something strange, like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Her eyes had briefly met his, and in that moment he had caught a glimpse of something other than the imperial mask, something fleeting, but real, like a crack in a perfect facade. He hadn't expected it to matter, but as he continued his work over the following days, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than what the Empire wanted the galaxy to see. She was always surrounded by a retinue of advisors and guards, never truly alone, always under the watchful eyes of those who wished to control her. But Leo noticed how she moved. When she thought no one was watching, how her gaze would wander to the stars, as if searching for something beyond the palace walls. The more time he spent in the palace, the more curious he became. The princess was a mystery, and Leo couldn't help himself. He found himself wanting to know more about the person behind the cold exterior, the leader who had been raised to rule and yet carried a burden no one could see. But what could he do about it? He was just a human engineer, nothing more than a cog in the machine of the Empire. He had his job to do, and nothing more. But that thought didn't stop him from stealing glances at her whenever she passed by. It didn't stop him from wondering who she really was, what lay behind the mask that everyone expected her to wear. After all, in a world where everyone pretended to be perfect, Leo had learned one thing for sure: nothing was ever as it seemed, not even a princess who seemed untouchable. The first time Leo spoke directly to Princess Zira was by accident. Or maybe it wasn't, he wasn't sure. He had been busy working on one of the royal shuttles deep in the palace hangar when she had arrived. Her presence almost made the entire room freeze. The air seemed to shift as she entered, her guards keeping a distance, but still watching every move. Leo barely had time to adjust before she was standing before him, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his throat go dry. She didn't say anything at first, just looked him over, her gaze lingering for a moment longer than was necessary. Leo felt his heartbeat quicken, but he didn't flinch. He never did when people stared at him. His father had always taught him to keep his composure no matter what. Leo wiped his hands on his coveralls and nodded politely. "Good morning, Your Highness," he said, his voice steady, but he couldn't help the tiny quiver that ran through him at the sight of her up close. She was more beautiful than he had imagined. The stories didn't do her justice, but it was something deeper than that, something behind her eyes that tugged at him in a way he didn't understand. Zira studied him for a moment, her lips pressing together, as if weighing something before she spoke, her voice cool and measured. "You're the human engineer who has been working on the fleet's upgrades," she said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Leo nodded again, trying to appear casual as he adjusted a few tools on the nearby table. "Yes, Your Highness," he said, keeping his gaze level, though he could feel the weight of her scrutiny. "You've been doing fine work," he added, even though it wasn't his place to compliment her. It slipped out before he could stop it, and the moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He had always prided himself on being professional, but there was something about her presence that made it hard to stay composed. She gave a small nod, her eyes softening just the slightest, her expression unreadable for a long moment. Leo wondered if he had overstepped or said something wrong. But then she surprised him when she spoke again. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said, her tone suddenly changing almost imperceptibly. "I don't suppose you've noticed anything strange about the ships you've been working on, have you?" Leo's brow furrowed, and he tilted his head at her, his mind racing. "Strange how?" he asked without thinking. She met his gaze again, her eyes narrowing slightly, her lips almost imperceptible in a frown. She took a step closer, a subtle shift in her stance, as though she was deciding how much to reveal. "You may not have noticed," she said quietly, "but there's more to these ships than just upgrades, hidden components that no one's supposed to know about." Leo's pulse quickened. Something about the way she spoke rang with a deep layer of warning, but also with something else, a challenge, curiosity. He couldn't deny that part of him wanted to know more. She was a princess, a ruler of the galaxy, yet here she was talking to him, the lowly human engineer, about secrets hidden deep within the palace and the ships themselves. It felt dangerous, and yet in that moment Leo couldn't help but feel a surge of something he hadn't expected: hope, Or maybe it was more like an invitation. Something in her eyes told him she wasn't just asking for help, she was reaching out for something more. He couldn't explain it, but the tension in the air thickened. It was as if she had cracked open a door, and now Leo had a choice to make: keep his head down and do his job, or step forward into something that could change everything. But before he could respond, she turned on her heel, her voice cutting through the silence one last time. "I'll be seeing you again, engineer," she said softly, almost to herself. And then she was gone, leaving Leo standing there, his mind racing, his heart pounding with more questions than he had ever had in his life. For days, Leo couldn't shake the feeling of her gaze, the way her words had hung in the air between them like an unspoken invitation. He had done his best to focus on his work, but every time his mind wandered, it went back to the princess and the cryptic warning she had left him with. He had always been good at solving problems, but this felt different. It wasn't just a malfunction or a simple mechanical issue. It was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface, something she was only willing to hint at. Leo found himself looking for answers in the smallest details. Every corner of the palace seemed to hold a secret he hadn't noticed before, every hallway a maze of whispers and shadows. But he couldn't stop himself. He needed to know what Zira had meant. He needed to understand why she had asked him, of all people, to uncover the hidden parts of the ships he worked on. His team was focused on the larger upgrades and improvements to the fleet, but Leo had a nagging feeling that there was more going on than anyone realized. Late one night, when most of the palace had gone quiet, Leo found himself once again in the royal hangar, working late on the shuttles he had been assigned to repair. The lights in the hangar flickered occasionally, and the hum of machinery filled the space as he carefully went over the wiring inside the shuttle, one of the craft that Zira herself used as part of her personal fleet. His fingers traced the contours of the ship's structure as he ran diagnostic checks. Something wasn't right. He could feel it deep in his gut. And it wasn't just the malfunctioning components. It was the way the shuttle seemed to hide things from him, things that didn't belong, things that shouldn't be there. As he worked, he began to notice subtle changes in the ship's layout, parts of the ship that seemed out of place, parts that weren't on the standard blueprint. Leo paused, his breath catching in his throat, as he uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the main deck, a compartment that didn't appear on any of the records or designs he had seen before. It was small and sealed with a heavy lock, a lock unlike anything he had ever seen before. As he worked to open it, his heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. When the compartment finally opened, Leo couldn't believe his eyes. Inside were the hidden components. Zira had mentioned pieces of advanced nanotech that looked far too sophisticated for standard repairs, parts that had been designed to hide imperfections beneath a layer of light and illusion. It was the exact technology that could conceal scars, the technology that had been rumored to be developed for the Lorethan elite to maintain their perfect appearances. Leo's pulse quickened as he realized what he had just discovered. This was the device that Zira had used to hide the truth of her injuries, the very thing she had concealed from the galaxy. He stared at the parts in his hand, trying to make sense of it all, his mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just about a malfunctioning shuttle. This was about a hidden truth, something Zira had kept buried beneath layers of technology and power. As Leo carefully examined the pieces, his thoughts turned to her and what she had told him about the ships and the hidden secret she had been forced to keep. She had trusted him with this knowledge, and now he was standing in the middle of a secret that could change everything for her and for the Empire. But what did he do now? How far should he go to uncover the truth? And what would it mean for his future with the princess? Would it bring them closer together or tear them apart? The weight of the discovery pressed down on him as he gently closed the compartment and carefully locked it back into place. He knew one thing for sure: he couldn't walk away from this now, no matter how dangerous it might be. Leo couldn't sleep that night. His mind raced with what he had discovered, the hidden compartment, the nanotech, the implications of what he had seen. It felt like the world had shifted beneath him, as if everything he had known about Zira and the Empire was suddenly in question. He had barely managed to focus on his work for the next few days, his hand shaking as he tried to make sense of what to do with the knowledge he now carried. Every time he passed a guard or interacted with someone in the palace, palace. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, or maybe he was just paranoid. Maybe it was the weight of what he had learned that made him so jumpy, but there was something more than that, something that told him he wasn't alone in this discovery, that others might be keeping secrets too. As the days passed, Leo found himself caught between two worlds. On one hand, he was just an engineer, a simple worker, with no business in the royal affairs of the Lorthan Empire. But on the other hand, he had been entrusted with something far bigger than a malfunctioning shuttle. He had uncovered the hidden truth of a princess, someone who was more than the flawless face the galaxy had come to worship, and it was only a matter of time before he would have to decide what to do with that truth. Would he ignore it and keep his head down, or would he dare to confront it and risk everything? But as much as he struggled with his thoughts, there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't ignore Zira. She had trusted him with her secret, and that trust had changed everything for him. It was more than just fascination or curiosity. He couldn't look at her the same way anymore. It wasn't just the fact that she was a princess or a leader, it was the realization that she was just like him, vulnerable and struggling to survive in a world that demanded perfection from everyone around her. Leo had seen the way she moved in the palace, the way her eyes would dart away from the crowds, the way she never seemed to stand still for too long. It was as if she was constantly running from something, and Leo couldn't help but wonder if it was the same thing he was running from: the fear of being exposed, the fear of being seen for who they really were. But no matter how hard he tried to push her from his mind, he couldn't forget about the moment she had revealed her vulnerability to him in the shuttle, and the way her eyes had softened when she had spoken about her scars. It was the first time he had seen her as something more than just a princess, someone with real pain and real fears, and that knowledge had changed him. It had opened a door to a world he hadn't known existed. He hadn't been prepared for how it felt to connect with her on that level, or how it made him feel responsible for her. Now, he couldn't turn away from the truth of who she was. And in the quiet moments when he was alone working late in the hangar, he couldn't help but wonder if Zira was feeling the same way. Was she looking for someone to understand her? Was she hoping someone would finally see her for who she truly was behind the royal mask? It wasn't long before he found himself walking toward the royal wing of the palace, the thoughts swirling in his mind, urging him forward. It felt reckless, but it felt necessary too. He needed to speak to her, to ask her about the things he had seen, about the secrets he was carrying, about the things she was hiding from the galaxy. But as he reached the door to her private quarters, he hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. Was he really prepared to confront her with what he knew? Was he ready to risk everything for a woman who had never shown weakness to anyone before? But before he could turn away, the door slid open slightly, revealing a figure standing in the shadows. Zira. Zira stood in the doorway, her figure barely illuminated by the dim light of the hallway. She had clearly been waiting for him, her presence commanding yet somehow hesitant, like she knew he would come but wasn't sure if he was ready for what she had to say. Leo's breath caught in his throat for a moment as their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that neither of them had expected, or perhaps it was just the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The long silence stretched between them before Zira spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You found it," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, only a quiet acceptance. Leo swallowed hard, his mind racing with 1,000 things he could say, but none of them seemed right. Not now, not when she was standing before him, looking so different from the woman he had seen in public. The princess, the ruler, the mask of perfection. He had grown so used to seeing she was just a person, now someone vulnerable, someone real. And for the first time since meeting her, Leo felt the full weight of what it meant to know her secret. He nodded slowly, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I just..." He stopped himself, unsure how to finish the sentence, unsure if words would make this any easier or harder. But Zira only looked at him. She didn't step back or turn away. She stayed where she was, watching him with an intensity that both unnerved and comforted him, her gaze unwavering. "You have questions," she said, and Leo could hear the quiet hint of something else in her voice. The way she had almost braced herself for what he might ask. It wasn't just the machines or the technology or the ships anymore. It was about her and him, about the space between them, that had suddenly felt smaller than ever before, and for the first time Leo realized just how much had changed for him, how much she had changed everything about his life, and his work seemed distant now. All that mattered was this moment, the two of them standing in this space, where the galaxy's expectations no longer mattered, where all that was left was the truth he had uncovered, and the connection between them that neither of them could ignore or deny. "I need to understand," he said finally, his voice firm with resolve. He wasn't sure what he was looking for exactly, but he knew he couldn't walk away from this. Not now, not after everything, not after seeing her as she truly was. "What is this? What is all of this? Why hide it from the galaxy? You have nothing to prove, Zira, and yet you—" Zira cut him off before he could finish. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them, her expression no longer cold, but raw. The mask she wore so effortlessly in public was gone now, replaced by something far more vulnerable. "I don't have the luxury of being myself," she said, her words carrying the weight of years of pain and fear. "I don't have the luxury of showing weakness to anyone, not to my people, not to my enemies, not even to you. You don't understand the pressure. I carry the burden of ruling a galaxy that demands perfection from me every single moment of my life." Leo felt his heart tighten as her words settled into the silence between them. He could see it now, see how she had been shaped by everything around her, by the expectations, the rules, the throne she was supposed to inherit, but never asked for, and as the truth of her struggles became clear to him, he realized that what she was hiding from the galaxy was more than just her scars. It was her soul. She had been hiding herself for so long from the world that she had forgotten how to be anything other than the princess, how to be anything other than what others expected of her. Leo took a step closer now, his voice gentle. "You don't have to hide anymore, Zira," he said quietly. "You don't have to carry it all by yourself." Zira's eyes flickered with something close to fear as she looked at Leo. She took a step back, her posture stiffening, like she was trying to retreat back into the mask. She had spent so long building the walls she had carefully constructed around herself, all those years threatening to rise up again. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the words Leo had spoken sinking into her like a weight she wasn't ready to carry. She didn't know how to let go of the control she had over her own image, the control she had over the galaxy's perception of her, the momentary vulnerability she had shown him felt like a crack in her armor, one that was already beginning to close. She opened her mouth to say something, to push him away, but the words wouldn't come. They felt hollow and useless. She couldn't explain it to him. How could she explain the years of constant pressure, the expectations that weighed down on her? How could she tell him that every decision she made was scrutinized, every smile, every gesture calculated for the cameras and the audiences who watched her every move? How could she tell him that the mask she wore wasn't just for the Empire or for the galaxy, but for herself too, so she didn't have to face the pain of who she truly was? Leo seemed to sense the shift in her. Even before she could fully pull away, his expression softened, his steps slow as he reached out a hand, like he was offering her something she couldn't refuse, a piece of comfort, a piece of understanding. "You don't have to hide from me, Zira," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I don't care about the mask. I don't care about the throne or the Empire. I care about you, the real you, not the princess, not the ruler, just you." Zira stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before, not with such sincerity, not with such care. She had always been surrounded by people who wanted something from her or expected something from her. But Leo was different. He didn't want her to be anything other than what she was in that moment, and it terrified her because it meant confronting the parts of herself she had locked away for so long. And yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen before: hope, maybe even a glimpse of freedom, the possibility that there could be more to her life than the weight of a crown and the expectations of an empire. She swallowed hard, feeling the tightness in her chest loosened slightly. "I've spent my whole life hiding," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life pretending to be someone. I'm not trying to be perfect for everyone around me. Even when I don't know how to be perfect for myself, I don't know what to do anymore." Leo took another step closer, closing the space between them until they were standing only inches apart. He reached out gently, taking her hand, and the touch warm and reassuring. "I can't promise to fix everything, Zira, "But I can promise that you don't have to carry it all by yourself," he said quietly, and for the first time Zira felt a spark of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, a flicker of hope, a flicker of trust. She didn't know if she was ready to let go of everything, but in this moment she felt like she could, maybe just a little bit, and that was enough. The silence between them stretched for what felt like hours, yet it was only moments, the weight of everything hanging in the air between them. Leo's hand still gently holding hers, his thumb brushing over her skin in slow rhythmic movements that calmed the storm inside her. Zira looked down at their hands, a small tremor running through her before she met his gaze again. She had been so used to standing alone, so used to carrying everything on her shoulders, that the idea of sharing it with someone else felt like a foreign concept. It was as if she was stepping into unknown territory, and for the first time she didn't feel like she had to do it alone. It terrified her, but it also felt like a relief. She had spent her entire life building walls around herself, never letting anyone get close enough to see the cracks. But here she was standing in front of Leo, letting him see the broken parts of her, the parts she had kept hidden for so long. And instead of recoiling or judging him, he had reached out to her with nothing but understanding and care. She didn't know how to respond to that, how to accept it. But she also knew she couldn't pull away now, not when she was so close to something she had always longed for, someone who saw her for who she truly was, and not what the Empire demanded she be. She took a deep breath and squeezed his hand gently. "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice softer than before. "Maybe I don't have to carry this alone." For the first time in a long while, the words felt true. They felt like a promise to herself that she wouldn't have to be the perfect princess or the flawless ruler anymore, that she could just be herself, even if it scared her to think about what that might mean. Leo gave her a small smile, the kind that made her heart flutter just slightly, as if he was letting her know that whatever came next, they would figure it out together. He didn't need her to be perfect. He didn't need her to change for him. He just needed her to be honest with herself and with him. And in that moment, Zira felt something shift inside her, a crack in the armor she had spent so long building. She wasn't sure where this would lead them, but for the first time she didn't feel afraid to find out. Leo reached up slowly and brushed a lock of hair from her face, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin as he tucked it behind her ear. "You don't have to be perfect, Zira," he said again, his voice steady and kind. "I know you're not perfect, and I don't want you to be. All I want is for you to be real." She felt the tears welling in her eyes at his words, the kindness and understanding so raw, so honest, that it made everything she had been hiding feel insignificant. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to share all the pain and the burden she had carried alone for so long, but instead she just nodded and looked at him the way he was looking at her, the way his gaze softened in a way that made her believe that maybe she wasn't so alone after all. Maybe she could finally let go of the fear of being seen for who she was, the real Zira, the woman behind the crown. She took a shaky breath, and without thinking she leaned in, closing the small distance between them, her lips brushing against his in a kiss that was soft and tentative, but also full of everything they had shared in this moment. Everything they had opened up to in this raw space between them. It wasn't the end of her journey or the end of the challenges she would face. But in that moment, Zira realized that she didn't have to face them alone. And neither did Leo. They would face it all together as equals, not as princess and engineer, but as two people who had found something real, something worth fighting for.